we're not always going to be driving around in gear 2. We're not always going to be driving around in gear 5. If we're approaching the roundabout and you're in gear 5, you're probably going to want to drop down to gear 3, gear 2, slow down, look to see who's coming. If you just plow through the roundabout in gear 5 without slowing down, probably going to cause an accident. And the same thing can be said in life. If we're not really aware of the fact that gear 5, gear 2 may be the appropriate use right now, doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck in that gear forever. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Alex. I'm a coach, and this podcast is all about self-development and helping you to live a happier and more fulfilling life. And if you like something that you hear in this episode and you learn something new, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more. And man, it feels good to be back. The eagle-eyed of you will notice that I've been MIA for the last month or so. And this is for mainly two big reasons. I was on 2 coaching retreats. The first one was being hosted by my friend and coach Sachin. And the second one I was hosting myself. And it was really hard to keep up with the podcast and putting out content. But I was making a ton of learnings over the last month or so, last 4 weeks particularly. And I'm really excited because I've got so many amazing learnings that I want to share with you guys. So the next few weeks of In Focus sessions are going to be fresh learnings off the back of these retreats. And on this week's In Focus session, I wanted to talk to you guys about what speed are you living your life at? And the reason that I wanted to bring this to the table today is because this is something that I've noticed for myself recently. While I was on the retreat that Sachin was hosting, we were having a conversation one day amongst the groups. We'd broken out into little 3-person breakout groups. And we were talking about what are we creating? And we were talking about this from a business perspective because everyone on the retreat was a coach. It was a business training retreat. So we were talking about what are we creating within our business? And my group flipped the question to what limitation are you creating with your business and in your life? And this question really sparked something for me because it got me thinking actually, what limitation am I creating in my life? And the thing that really landed for me during that conversation was that I realized what I'm doing with my business is I'm approaching everything at 100 miles an hour. I'm approaching everything like it's in gear 5 if I was driving a car. And if I wasn't doing anything in gear 5, it felt to me that I wasn't doing anything. It felt to me like I was just in neutral. And as we know, those of you who drive or those of you who don't, there's a lot of gears in the car to move through. There's gears 1 right up to 5, sometimes 6. And each gear has its appropriate use at an appropriate time. And what I was seeing was that because I was approaching my business in gear 5, 2 main things were happening. First of all, it's not the best use of a car. If you're always driving a car in gear 5, it's not going to be the best use. Something's going to give. The gearbox will go, you'll burn out the clutch, the engine might blow up. Who knows? I don't know a lot about cars, but anything can happen. It can't be good for you if you're always driving in gear 5, right? And the other thing that I realized was that whilst my business has been in gear 5 and I've been pushing really hard and doing everything at 100 miles an hour and putting a lot of energy and focus into it, what it's meant is that the other areas of my life have dropped down to being second gear or first gear. So my relationships, my health, my social time, my time for my hobbies, and etc, etc, etc. And it doesn't really seem like a great balance to have most of the stuff going on in my life in gear 2 and then business at gear 5. It doesn't really seem like that's an appropriate solution of how to do things. And it made me think what would be different if I was approaching everything across the board in gear 3? Because really and truly, when you're driving a car, yeah, there's a use for gear 5. Yeah, there's a use for gear 1. More often than not, you're probably driving in gear 3 or 4. You're not using gear 5 all the time. You're going to use it when you're on a dual carriageway or on motorway. There's uses for it. It's an appropriate tool to have in the car when the time is right. Same with gear 1. You're going to need first gear when you're taking off from a traffic light. When you start the car and you get moving, you need to be in gear 1. If you try and do that in gear 3 or 4, you're not going to go anywhere. Again, you probably blow up your gearbox or something. And I'm starting to really see it as it's the same with life. Approaching things and adjusting the speed at which you're doing things to the speed at which your life is at in the moment. And having that awareness has honestly changed so much to me. I'm really starting to see that if I'm approaching my weeks from a perspective of gear 3, which might mean instead of having 10 calls in a week, it might mean I just have 5. there's still progress being made. I'm not doing it at 100 miles an hour in gear 5, therefore I'm less likely to burn out. And over the long term, it's probably a lot better for me. I'm less likely to burn out. It's going to help me be more consistent. I'm not going to have big ups and big downs. It's just going to be consistent across the board. And again, this isn't just about business, right? If you're listening to this episode, listen to it from the perspective of what area of my life am I maybe approaching things in gear 5, and what could be different if it was maybe in gear 3. And it's not to say one's better than the other, but economically speaking, it's about using the gears where appropriate, right? And I'll give you an example of this. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday, and without giving away too many details, my client was starting to feel quite overwhelmed with a certain situation that was going on in his life. He felt that he'd got himself in a really good place of our work. He was really on top of his daily routines and his habits, and he was really cultivating, good output in his life, right? He was coming from a place of calm and clarity, and he was creating good output. And he recently signed up for a course, and this course was a lot more overbearing than he thought. So it's been taking up a lot of his time in the evenings. He's been having late nights, which means his routines has been out of whack. And the course is only for I think 8 weeks in total. But over the course of the program that he signed up for, he started to feel really overwhelmed because he's been putting so much energy and time into, this course and completing it and doing the tasks that are required, etc., that he feels like everything else in his life has slipped. His sleeping pattern's gone, up and down. He's not exercising as regularly. His daily habits, he's not getting out for as much walks or exercise. He's at his desk a lot of the time. And we were talking about it, and I said to him, can you be okay with the fact that, you've got more energy going into this program right now than you do the other areas of your life? And he sat there for a second and he thought about it, and he said, I want to say yes, but I actually can't be, because I know that all this other stuff is good for me, like my walks, my exercise, etc. And the fact that I'm not doing it, I'm getting frustrated and overwhelmed because I feel like I have to be doing this other stuff instead. And I was using the car analogy with him, and I was like, well, it's like saying I'm on a motorway right now and I'm driving in gear 5 and I'm frustrated that I can't be driving in gear 2. The thing is, it's not appropriate to be driving in gear 2 on a motorway. If you're doing 20 miles an hour on a motorway, you're probably causing some disruptions. And I'm pretty sure it's maybe illegal to drive that slow in a motorway, but don't count me on that. And I was talking to him about it, and I said, what if the only thing that is causing you conflict right now is wanting something different other than what you're experiencing right now? Because to me, what I was seeing was he wanted to have his daily routines on point, his sleep on point, his exercise on point, etc., etc., etc. But because he was so immersed in this program, like I said, to do the tasks, to complete the work and stuff like that, he wasn't physically able to do that stuff. And the point of conflict for him was wanting a different experience other than the one that he's having. So I asked him, can you be okay with this program being in gear 5 right now and everything else being in gear 2, including your work, including your sleep, including your eating habits, including your exercise? And the more we spoke about it, the more he was like, actually, yeah, I can see how what I'm doing right now for the future of me, I've invested in myself and this course for my future, for my benefit. So being in gear 5 right now with this program is the appropriate use of my gear 5 right now. And everything else, I can be okay with being in gear 2. And when the course is over, then he might slip everything else into gear 3, gear 4, and get back to the place where he would like to be as a preference. But by thinking that he was going to be experiencing something better by having more of the routine on point, his sleep on point, etc., etc., that was the thing that was causing him the conflict. It wasn't actually the fact that he was doing the program. It was his thinking that was telling him, I would be feeling better, I could be doing more of that, and I'm not doing enough. And when he saw that he didn't need to buy into that thinking, and that actually it was quite appropriate for him to be in gear 5 with the program right now and the course that he's doing, it made sense, much like a car. We're not always going to be driving around in gear 2. We're not always going to be driving around in gear 5, sometimes when we need to slow down when we're driving, if we're approaching a roundabout, for example, and you're driving your car and you're in gear 5 and you're approaching a roundabout, it's probably not the best thing to be doing. You're probably going to want to drop down to gear 3, gear 2, slow down, look to see who's coming, check that there's time and space, move on across the roundabout. If you just plow through the roundabout in gear 5 without slowing down, probably going to cause an accident. And the same thing can be said in life, right? If we're unconsciously and not really aware of the fact that gear 5, gear 2, gear 3, whatever it is, may be the appropriate use right now, and that's it. Doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck in that gear forever. Same way in a car. When I set off and I go into first gear, I'm not like, oh man, I have to drive the whole way in gear 1 now. No, because I know I don't. I know that I can move into gear 2, gear 3, into gear 4. Then I'll probably drop back down to gear 3, gear 2 when I'm slowing down, back into gear 3 again, and use the gears appropriately. And it's the same thing when it comes to life, you know, adjusting the speed of your life to what is appropriate for that moment in time. And what I'd like to offer you is the chance to reflect on that question, you know. What speed are you moving in your life right now? And is it appropriate for where you're at? For me, a lot of the time in the last few months, it seemed like it's been appropriate for me to be in gear 5 with my business. But I've also seen how unhealthy my thinking has been around that, in that if I'm not in gear 5, then I'm stationary. I'm not doing anything. But it's also not true. I can be in gear 3. I could even be in gear 2 if I wanted to, and I'd still be making progress. Same goes with exercise routines. Some weeks, for example, the last 2, 3, 4 weeks where I've been on retreats in the country, out of the country, my gym routine hasn't been in, you know, gear 4 where I like it to be, and I'm going gym consistently 3, 4 times a week. I've been going maybe once, twice a week. Can I be okay with that? Can I be okay with the fact that my gym routines right now have been in gear 1? Yeah, I can. Because I know that I've been spending my time and investing my time in different areas, like being on the retreats, like traveling, etc., which means the price I pay for that is that my personal development is in gear 5 because I'm on retreats, which can be quite intense. But it means that my physical health, in terms of how much I like to exercise and my regular routine, is more likely to be in gear 2 or gear 1. And I can be okay with that because I know that I'm adjusting my pace of life where appropriate in different scenarios. So I'd love to hear from you. You know, I record these episodes not just so I can sit here and talk into the camera and share the stuff that I'm learning. I record these episodes because I want to open a conversation with you. I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to know, what have you got from this episode? And secondly, I'd love to know, what gear do you think that you're in your life right now? And just to message me and get in contact, all you have to do is hit me up on Instagram at @IamAlexManzi, drop me a DM, and I'll answer those 2 questions. You know, what have you learned from this episode? What's been your biggest learning, biggest takeaway? And secondly, what gear do you think you're in your life right now? And if you know someone who you think would benefit from listening to this episode, then be sure to send it to them. Send them the screenshot, a link, whatever's appropriate, and let them know that it could be an episode that's beneficial for them to listen to. I record these episodes because I want to make a positive change in the world, and you can play a part in that by sharing this episode with someone you know today. So I want to thank Michele Atsu for editing and producing this episode, and as always, I want to thank Hobgoblin for providing the music, and I also want to shout out you for spending time with me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you for the next episode.